We are honored to have here at our university the expert of the Finnish Ministry of Anti-Corruption, Mr. Keränen, for this open to the public discussion on international efforts against corruption best practices. At this point, I would like to express my great satisfaction about the growing collaboration between the Finnish Embassy and the University of Cyprus in fields of common interest and the close ties dynamically built between the two countries. I am confident that the collaboration between the diplomatic and academic entities will be continuously strengthened.
As you all probably know, Nordic countries are all doing well when it comes to fighting corruption. Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway are all among the least corrupt nations in the world. The latest corruption perception index by Transparency International put New Zealand and Denmark on the first place. Finland was number 3, Sweden number 4, and Singapore tied with Norway number 5. Iceland was number 12. What is really, I think, very important about lack of corruption is that it gives everybody equal opportunity, the possibility to utilize the potential of the whole society. In a society where people advance on their merit, not through networks and connections, is a society where best people get to the top. And this happens in the Nordics. And when you look at the leadership in our countries, what do you find? Women, more women in leadership positions than anywhere else in the world, except in Rwanda in Africa. The highest proportion of women in the parliament is in Rwanda. And Rwanda is in different class with all its neighbors when it comes to corruption. It's the least corrupt nation in East Africa, and Transparency International noted in 2010 that incidents of bribery in Rwanda are almost non-existent. It's by far the least corrupt country in East Africa, and according to Transparency International's ranking last year, it was number 7 in all of Africa. That women have higher standards of ethical behavior and appear to be more concerned with common good is suggested also by research. University of Maryland has revealed in one of its research papers. This statement has also been underlined by a World Bank study on corruption and women in government. The study concludes that higher rates of female participation in government are associated with lower levels of corruption.
My intention tonight was to present some, very briefly, some basic facts about the situation in Finland, how we have been fighting against corruption. We do have it, not much. But then after that, I would like to step outside the Finnish borders to our neighboring countries to have a look what is happening there. And then just mention a few cases which have been in media, newspapers, and try to draw some conclusions from those cases. And in the end, to talk about a little of the history of anti-corruption and what kind of topics are discussed today. And what I have seen and read in internet about Cyprus, I see that these questions are here the same as in any other countries. So, but let me start by explaining the situation in Finland. I can say that there is a minimum amount of corruption. It's only few cases per year. going to court. And this situation has been stable since, let me say, from the middle of 1990s. 95, Transparency International started to publish this TI index, and I think we were 10 years after that in position number 1, the least corrupt country in the world, and few times after that also. Well, you can always ask what does it mean, how scientific approach this kind of index has. To me personally, it's a challenge to make a question mark to it, because my work in the Ministry of Justice is to coordinate everything what is happening in Finland and also plan the future actions. And I can say I'm never happy to see what's happening. We need to do all the time everything else. Our work is fine-tuning at the moment in legislation, but there are lots of open questions. One of the results of this kind of situation is that we have only few cases going to the court every year. I'm talking now about bribery offense, giving or taking a bribe. So partly we are still lacking of court practice of bribery offenses. At the moment we are getting more and more cases from abroad, so we have links to other countries. So it's a challenge to our courts to understand also that false agreements really are used, but it's a problem for the law enforcement to show the evidence that this is the fact. We don't have any kind of anti-corruption policy. We don't have a strategy. In our ministry, we have a common understanding of our own list about things we are going to put on the table. Many of those things are based on the recommendations of international organizations, as other countries. So I can say that anti-corruption work in practice is normal work of crime prevention. It's when we talk about criminal investigation, it's daily routine. Is it a fraud case or whatever economic crime case it is? So it's nothing special. We don't have any extra additional resources to anti-corruption. It is being done with the normal resources we have, and we have to do everything else too. So we don't have a special authority for that. If it's a criminal investigation case, we take it to the police, which is the head of investigation in Finland, and after they have done their work, the case will be taken to the prosecutor. Our situation has not been such good always. As you might remember, we were in war against the Soviet Union, and in 1940s we had the biggest number of cases of corruption during the wartime, and it was based on the fact that selling and buying food was very heavily restricted. So there was a black market, and the peak of the statistics comes from there. After that, 1980s, we had huge cases in construction business. We had a lot of cases. And what happened was that in the beginning of 1990s, there was a rapid change for attitude. We needed to change as a consequence of this heavy discussion, our attitude to corruption, and that meant in practice that we changed the Civil Service Act there were some obligations given to civil servants. And we also changed totally the criminal code, giving and taking bribe. So new paragraphs were needed to let's say, settle down the situation. So after that, situation has been very good. Normally, if you read, well, while we are in the university now, so there are lots of researches. What are the reasons for good situation of corruption? Well, low number of corruption. They are quite often mentioned that social factors are one of the main reasons for low number of corruption. Well, I think that is true, but the main point here is that that if you are working, you get a salary and you can live with your salary, normally the daily life. Well, we have a good situation. In our daily life, we never face corruption. If we go to the doctors, they don't ask any additional payments. We can take our children to the kindergarten or to the school. We don't need to, maybe just to take an apple to the teacher as in the movies, but nothing else. No payments are requested or even given. So this is the general points of our situation, but we do have gray areas there too, like cooperation with the business sector. We do know that in addition to the formal statistics, financial institutions, banks, and big companies, they have all kinds of, let's say, actions inside their companies, so which are not told to us. So they are secret. And finally, I could say that our legislation covers most of the situation. Fortunately, we have also we are inside also as members for OECD, Council of Europe, and United Nations conventions against corruption. So that is one good way of getting also pressure outside and let politicians know that we need to change some legislation. And that's one of the best benefits you can get from there. At the moment, some actual topics. We have been rewriting the Code of Conduct guidance to our members of Parliament. We are thinking about how to fine-tune the conflict of interests guidance, how the given gifts and also the incomes and or links to private business should be declared. So as a declaration, as in the Council of Europe Greco working group evaluations, we also have faced the need for ethical principles for judges and prosecutors. At the same time, we are thinking about how to change the legislation of widening the criminal liability for private enterprises to accountant offences and other situations. Criminal liability is a bit problematic to us because our prosecutors have, in 2 cases, required it, and it has been accepted there, but it has not been used as much as I would have liked to see it. So And in addition, the maximum amount of a fine in Finland is 850,000 euros, which is nothing nowadays. When in the middle of 90s this law was established, then it was okay, but now the time has passed this amount. I don't know how you have it here, but we can discuss it later. Also, the Statute of Limitation, it means when the bribery offense will get old, so that the prosecutor cannot anymore prosecute or the judge make a conviction. Earlier, OECD decided that 5 years in the basic forms of bribery offenses is enough when the case can get old, but the practice has changed. 5 years is not enough anymore. This is bringing us a problem because of OECD interpretation, we should need our whole system for all crimes because of this small thing like foreign bribery offense. So it would mean that we should change all statute of limitations because of this one offense. Then we have some problems with how to get the money back from the criminals. In courts, there have been sometimes been some cases where you should, according to the law, take away from criminals the benefit they gained from the crime. Would it mean in business situation that if you make a public procurement and you win the case by bribing somebody, so would it mean that the whole contract value should be confiscated? Or is it only the money of a bribe which was paid? So I don't know how you interpret this kind of situations, but these are the situations we face in the court. The more we have cases from abroad, the more we have also problems. The cooperation with foreign countries is not always easy, because we have seen, and in some cases, all the secret information is leaked to the press and explained in details in some cases. So in concrete cases, it's a big problem to how can you trust the foreign authorities if you really don't know them. We also are thinking about the training in influence legislation, which is not obligation according to the Council of Europe Convention, Criminal Law Convention, and also United Nations Convention and Council of Europe. We are thinking because it's very close to lobbying in the Parliament, so our members of Parliament are very careful accepting this kind of a law because they might be in danger because the border between lobbying and trading in influence is very thin. But if we had this kind of a law, it would have helped us to win some cases in the court. Well, there are also a question of reporting obligations to auditors and accountants, and also to all civil servants. I guess you have this obligation here in Cyprus, but we don't have it. So that's what we are thinking. And always the awareness raising is very important. We also need to have some more research, scientific research, also on this topic. So here, when I'm talking about corruption, I talk about giving a bribe or taking a bribe. So, but we have seen, and you might have seen, that when people talk about corruption, it very often includes all kinds of economic crimes like frauds, tax evasion, money laundering. Well, they are linked. But if you want to follow the statistics and have clear statistics, I think, this is only my opinion, that you need to separate them. Well, corruption, it might be also political appointments for high positions. Our citizens very often criticize our politicians, minister who appoints somebody from the same party, but as always, the minister always denies it's not political decision at all. So, but everybody else thinks that it is. So, what I mean here by saying that that the definition of corruption is different in other countries, in various countries. So it's always a national decision how you want to face it. Well, if you talk about bribes, so in Finland, traditionally, the amounts of given bribes have been very small. A few years ago, only a few €100, maybe taking a big boss to listen to the opera or somewhere, or to take him abroad and pay also, well, let's say dinner and champagne and maybe wife along there and so on. Well, there are cases where our chiefs of some cities have gone to Estonia to have sex with the city council credit card and so on. So there are lots of various situations. But nowadays the situation has changed. That now we talk much more about bigger amounts of money, millions of euro, tens of millions of euro. So this means in practice that if you are holding a company, so you make it that way that it is included into the accounts of the company. Okay, this is all, I would say, almost always the situation. So when we are talking about bribery offense, we talk also about accountant office, and also later perhaps on auditing office when it's not declared in the auditing. So when it is an accountant office, so the consequence is that it's automatically, of course, the tax evasion. So then we are very close to money laundering situation. So all these offenses are very close to each other. Then there is also a very strange point in the OECD convention, like facilitation payment. I don't know if it's accepted here in Cyprus, but facilitation payment is a small, repeatedly paid amount of money. It's an everyday practice. Let's say in Southern America, often when the ship comes to the port, they pay some kind of small payment to the authorities in the port. So it's normally accepted small amount of money to get some benefits. Nowadays it's used in USA, Canada, Australia, and in some other countries. Fortunately, OECD has now changed its position to this question a little, so it's not accepting it anymore. like that, but the denial for this small facilitation payment in the OECD background papers is a bit soft. Okay, let's jump out from the borders of Finland a little. So if we want to see what is the corruption situation in other countries, I can say that I try to do it sometimes, but it's impossible, because it's a main rule that statistics are not in order in relation of bribery offenses or corruption. And that one reason is that what I already mentioned is that it's a national thinking, what is included into corruption. Our neighboring country in the south, Estonia, it's an everyday situation. It's 75 kilometers from Helsinki, and there are still doctors, various kinds of permissions, checking the car, and so on, are everyday situations, and people face it. In 2007, they had about 500 corruption offenses. 1 year later, 274, and 2013, only 161. So they have managed to do something, and the number of cases has decreased. If we go to east, our neighbor there is the Russian Federation. According to the Rosstat, which is the state statistics of authority, in 2011 the corruption from the GDP of the state was about 15%. This is an official information from Rosstat. But if you listen to the economists, they say that it's 25. It was 25. And according to World Bank, it was 48. So it meant in practice that according to these statistics, next year, 2012, they had about 12,000 cases. But what kind of conclusion can you draw from the situation when the GDP, half of the GDP is corruption? If you go to west from Finland, we have Sweden. Their situation has also been very stable. They have about 100 cases every year reported to the police, but in time period of 2003 and 2011, how many years does it make? About 8-9 years. They had 270 convictions. Normally, the consequence is conditional imprisonment and some kind of a fine. But what is interesting, if you have a look at the last year's statistics from Bulgaria, there's a new record for 15 years, and they had, according to their statistics, 158,000 cases of corruption every month. Every month, can you imagine? So they say that they are criminal transfers of money every month. Well, here you can see the difference again. How can you evaluate this kind of a figure? But that's what they inform. So this old saying that there is a lie and there is the biggest lie and then there is a statistics, there you can draw conclusions that is it so or not. So in addition, when we think about this kind of situation and the corruption which is hidden criminality, so if it's true what the scientific researchers say, that from economic crimes about 5 to 10% will be reported, only 5 to 10% of cases will be reported to the law enforcement. It's amazing. But those researchers also say that from all of these cases, only 1 to 2% are from bribery offences will be reported to law enforcement. And if at the same time EU Commission is saying in its report of EU Anti-Corruption Report 2014 that the losses every year for EU member states is about 120 or 30 billion euros. So I'm not sure if it's true or not. It can be something else. Maybe you can put 10 after this figure, I don't know. But is this guessing or not? So when you see these figures, I would recommend you to be suspicious a little to if you think about where do we get these numbers. Okay, very briefly, few cases which have been in publicity. You all have seen the International Football Association FIFA. The numbers of suspected people, it's quite large. The amounts of various money for marketing and various kind of agreements for Olympic Games are huge. You can imagine there are lots of construction business. So very many high-level people there are suspected now. Then we have seen that in Brazil, one very big oil company has been trying to get permissions to build construction programs. Well, there you can see that ex-president of the state is also involved and in the group of suspected people. The amount is about 3 billion euros. It can be more. Then, if you look at the situation in Spain or Portugal, huge amounts of cases. Even the royal family has been involved, according to law enforcement, at least in money laundering. Huge cases around oil and construction in Russia. We have from Helsinki to St. Petersburg, we have a quite new train connection, which is very fast. It goes in 3 hours, 3.5 hours from Helsinki to St. Petersburg. Earlier it took 1 day to go there. So what happened was that in Russian side there was a construction business and hundreds of millions of euros were reserved for this train line update. So 2/3 of that money has disappeared now. Sweden has been adventuring with TeliaSonera, telephone company in Uzbekistan. In Italy, ex-Prime Minister Berlusconi just received 3-year sentence for 3 million euros bribe. And in Romania, in last 2 years, tens of cases of corruption and huge amounts of money. What kind of conclusions can we draw from these cases? There are quite often the heads of states, ministers, high-level officials, politicians, lawyers, companies involved. Amounts of money are very big and they tend to get bigger all the time. They tend to be related to various kinds of permissions, public procurement, construction. The normal way of doing this is to use middlemen, third people to do the work, to transfer money, consultancy, and normal way, easiest way is to make fake, false contracts and business by that way, either with direct buying payments fees, discounts, or loans. These are the normal ways of doing it. And of course, the money will be circulated abroad through various companies, tax havens, and so on. Normally, when we start investigating these cases, situation is that there's a person who has bank account abroad and where the amount of money is increasing all the time without a clear explanation or a possible receiving money from family members or relatives or friends, and who also can have a new kind of properties which is not, it cannot be explained by their own salaries or their income, which they report to the tax authorities. This is called illicit enrichment. I don't know if you have it or are you planning to get it. We can talk about it. But you can see that power, when you have power, there are people who need to or want to have it more. If you have money, lots of money already, there are people who want to have it even more. Is this greedy for money and power? I don't know. But it's spoiling. This is the saying we have, that money and power are spoiling people. The bigger company there is, the bigger risk there is to face the bribery. And you can imagine that if the situation is like this, how can the law enforcement, the pre-trial investigators and prosecutors collect the evidence? You need to go abroad to get all kinds of declarations and things, paperwork, and takes time. It's very difficult. If I have time, then I would like to end my presentation about speaking about a little of prevention of corruption, fight against corruption, and what has happened, and what are some topics which are on the table at the moment. I hope I have a few minutes still. Okay, thank you.
I want to give time for questions.
Okay. Normally, if you read books on corruption and fighting against corruption, there are some books which say that after the scandals of President Nixon in USA, in 1977 there was new law, U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, written and accepted, and the reason was that authorities in U.S. wanted to test, in a way, kind of amnesty for companies, but they were totally surprised when they saw that more than 400 companies declared how they had avoided taxes, and well, what they reported was that the amount of money was more than $300 million US. At the same time, results were good, but it was a shock that it was so large thing. In Russia, the tax police was established in 1991. What they tested there was that part of the confiscated money went to the tax police themselves. Well, but later I worked a lot with those guys. They loved to go to confiscate property with machine guns and lots of people. But the problem was that they got this part of the confiscated money to the tax police. They bought cars to everybody, so they misused the money. So that was one of the reasons they had to finish the office. In England, there was 1998 Public Interest Disclosure Act, which is one of the first laws concerning whistleblowing. What happened was that next year, when the law came into force, the reporting, the number of reports from citizens was doubled, and in the next few years, the number was 10 times more than they started. USA has tested a very interesting method now. In 2011, they made this Dodd-Frank Act, which gives the whistleblower from the convicted assets to the state 10 to 30%. Results have been very good, what I have been hearing. In few cases, some of these whistleblowers have become hugely rich. They have earned millions. I would say that one of the best things fighting in corruption in the last 20 years have been these international conventions. They are not perfect, but they have this country evaluation system, which is a good tool to make politicians to changes for legislation. I can see that this was first tested with drugs. The first international conventions were concerning drugs, then it was money laundering, then corruption. Now we're talking about cybercrime. It has the same situation. So in the middle of the 90s, we got OECD and Council of Europe, and 10 years later, United Nations. Consequence has been development of legislation, also following up the implementation of laws, because respect to law legislation, it's different in countries. And also to see how effectively authorities are working. In many countries, state wants to have a corruption strategy. It's very normal. Well, we don't have it, but I have seen lots of those papers. They can be a political manifestation for elections only, but in the best possible situation, they can be very effective tool, and sometimes it's a very effective political commitment to implement or do some things in fighting corruption. One of the best means fighting against corruption is effective, independent pre-trial investigation and prosecution, and also court procedure. And the best situation is when it's professional, high quality, and the cases could be handled very quickly and also always registered, because there are countries where the cases disappear. Nobody knows what happened to them. You always need to give grounds. Why did you decide this way? There are many cases where the superior is saying that, okay, we'll stop here investigation, and that's it. Or the investigator will be changed or kicked out. Investigation might last years and cases get old. It's also a question of management, and you need to have visions and objectives. So you need to know what you're doing. One of the most remarkable things are the new standards for business, and I would like to mention here the UK Bribery Act from 2010. In bribery or corruption cases, the company has the obligation to prove that the internal procedures in the company are enough. So they have to prove it. So, and what is important here is also that this applies also to subcontractors and all the partners you are dealing with this business. Well, just to conclude, there are lots of various interests for public procurement, also getting information from foreign banks. It's for money laundering cases. Now it looks like EU practices are getting better. Political party financing, many countries it's difficult because the decision makers should make themselves restrictions to their own parties. Sometimes it's a bit difficult. Declaration of assets, conflicts of interests, ethical codes, plea bargaining. Here just an example that a few years ago in Estonia, more than 90% of bribery offenses were taken to plea bargaining situation. The question mark here might be that prosecutors get a bit more salary the more they take cases to plea bargaining. But the thing is that court has to confirm the negotiation. There are problems with asset recovery. Some countries had a problem earlier that when you find the money from the criminal's home, so that you had to prove that this is the same physical money that was used in the bribery offense. Fortunately, this situation has been changing. Lots of questions of immunities of members of parliament, revolving doors, lobbying rules, illicit enrichment, already mentioned here. But I think I failed to follow the timeline here, so but I stop here. So thank you for your...
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, you did fail the timeline, but you exceeded expectations in giving information. As you know, at universities, the audience learns a lot from the question and answer than from the lecture. So we'll have maybe 15 minutes to have some discussions with Mr. Keränen. Thank you very much. Yes. Floor is open for questions from the audience. Director.
150,000 cases in Bulgaria. 150,000 cases per month.
Suspicious money transfers, which they themselves say that it's corruption.
Yeah, but what is the most important corruption? The 150,000 per
month,
or the 4 million Volkswagen cars that they came out with software?
Yeah, is it a fraud or whatever crime is it? So what I have been only reading in newspapers that they knew it, and they well, you have to know when you install this kind of a program to the car.
It's fraud, but not corruption.
Well, well, it doesn't need to be corruption, yes. but at least it sounds like fraud.
Panos?
Continue on this line. This is well known within the European Union. Why did the EU doesn't do anything on the corruption in the members to put pressure in that? I think they have the means.
Well, partly I agree because European Union has well, I have been trying to go through everything I have tried to find in EU on this topic, and it's very passive. We have Council of Europe Convention. It has been monitored a little, but not much. Well, they check. EU is checking how Council of Europe paragraphs have been implemented, or accepted in the legislation. But EU Commission tried last year when they published this anti-corruption report. So that's all. So it's very minimum actions I can see myself. So it should be more effective. The other thing is that EU is, however, giving technical assistance to many countries, also to applicant countries for EU. So the amounts of money are big. So there are lots of corruption projects and programs ongoing in various countries. This is good, but in principle, in general level, I would like to see much more actions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Eric.
The Cyprus government has been recently shown to be quite open in seeking advice, best practices from other member states. I'm stating the example of Estonia, who has offered, after Cyprus government request, to help the Cyprus government in their effort for public service reform, in particularly in applying e-governance. We are very, very far behind in e-governance, and Estonia apparently is one of the best in Europe, in the EU, and the government of Estonia has accepted to provide directly consulting on this particular aspect. So I was wondering if in this particular aspect, fighting against corruption, which requires a lot of political will from politicians, and if such political will were to exist, whether your government would be willing to provide some advice. And I would say that the idea of an independent authority against corruption would help in not only establishing a strategy, anti-corruption strategy, but implementing it. You see, it's not just about prosecuting people. This can be done by the prosecution authorities. It's establishing a specialized authority against corruption. And in this respect, if you are a fairly corrupted country, which unfortunately we are, it's very difficult to have such knowledge, such know-how from inside. What would you think about it?
Well, this gives me lots of comments actually, but very briefly, you are right. Estonia is a good example for IT. So you can see that various EU countries are specialized in something in fighting against corruption. So this is a good example. They are really good, and they have systematically put resources there and now they are in this situation. If your question is to target it to Finnish government, so to help, so I have nothing against it. So it's possible, but this would require a bit more further discussions for what kind of things it could be. Maybe this is a good start here today, tonight. I don't know. But you are right. If somebody says that he is an anti-corruption expert, I have doubts, because I have tried to learn these things myself more than 20 years already. And I'm learning every day new things. There are really good professionals, I would say. But it's so large area that it's including so many specialized things that there are not so many people that can handle everything, not even me. But you are right. If you are going to establish an authority here in Cyprus, which should be, of course, independent, what happened in Latvia was that the government tried to mix there in the KNAB, their quite new anti-corruption office, and it was population, citizens in Latvia got crazy because they really saw for the first time in their history that there is an independent office. But then you need there, as you say, the specialized people to do it. And you get only specialized when you deal with these things. Yeah. You learn. If you get good people there, and in your country, I'm sure you have these investigators, prosecutors who are specialized in these cases. Why don't you use them? Yeah.
It seems also, I mean, it's a learning process from both sides.
Exactly.
I mean, corruption has been evolving. You talked about the Dodd-Frank Act, recent one, and the whistleblower getting a percentage of the profits. But there was a law back after the Civil War where there was the same incentive because there was a lot of corruption during the US Civil War with military procurement. So they gave incentives for whistleblowers. So people are becoming more intelligent on the corrupt side. And we need what Eric is saying. And Eric is part of the citizens' initiatives to push against corruption and electoral reform and the Greco adoption. So it was not an innocent question. He thought a lot about having an anti-corruption agency in Cyprus. So we take it positively that you're positive for getting help, but you are not committing the government yet.
Okay. Yeah, I leave it to Anu. She can arrange it.
No, we need discussion, but I think that's a very good point. So thank you, Eric. Thank you for the answer.
Also, whistleblowers, they can keep their anonymity in UK, which is very important.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, if you are planning this whistleblower protection law, which I understood is the situation at the moment, so well, there are models here. So like US, UK, Norway. They have different approaches. The legislation, well, there is this Council of Europe decision on this, and you can see the clear guidelines from there, but to repeat it here is that the legislation has to be very clear, procedures have to be very clear, there has to be reliable process for the complaints, and if needed, the anonymous complaints have to be possible. And what is critical normally is how to protect whistleblowers. So is it only administrative protection like, well, in Norway they have in the labor law a paragraph where they say that the employee has a right to make a whistleblowing and without any punishment. But then there is this other side, because practice has shown that some people do it in purpose and they give false complaints. That is one side which has to be checked.
But there should be a punishment of that one too, right?
Well, at least the practice they use, some countries, is that they need to pay the damages they cause. Yeah. So I don't know any other kind of a punishment, but at least pay what they cause here. So this is what is
deterrent enough.
Yeah, depending on the situation. So there are various. Well, in countries where they have serious problems and they really want to use whistleblowing, they start paying them. If the complaint leads to final conviction. So there are various ways to do it, but the problem is how to protect the person. And there is also this requirement from the Council of Europe that it is taken seriously, that these complaints are checked, and all kinds of revenge from the company management is forbidden, and so on. So it's an interesting question, and difficult also.
Question there? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Keränen, thank you so much for your informative speech. My question might be also a little bit interested, as Professor Zenio said. All the success factors of the Finnish model, if we analyze them, they are all in the long run. So the prominent position of women in political decision-making does not come from one day to the other, although it can, but it seems not so easy in this respect in Cyprus. You need a legislative, judicial, and administrative functional service. So education, training in ethics, in management and business schools and all this. So all those factors are in the long run. So for a country like ours that is now in a transitional period, that is trying to build a new state, I think it's very important to build on the rule of law and on anti-corruption good practices. So what would be your advice to us in this respect? Because the long-term factors, we cannot get them immediately. So what kind of advice would you give us on how to proceed until we get there? Thank you so much.
Let's also take another question.
Okay.
Then you answer both of them and you wrap it up.
Yes,
We're
okay.
approaching the limit, so please.
So I would like to ask you from your experience, which do you think are the main causes of corruption and why there are so large differences between Scandinavia and, for example, the countries of Southern Europe?
You are a student at the university? Okay. Kalion is a colleague from the university, the political science department, the student. From which department? Economics. That's it. Okay. Well, thank you.
You are right. Do you mean that you don't have the patience to wait for the results? Well,
the country has been destroyed, so
yeah.
much patience.
Well, you are right. The success factors they are factors from long run, and it's a mixture of social, cultural, mental, legislative background, history, everything. So this is the fact. But then, if I would have to, or I had the possibility to help you, and think about what I would do in your situation, I would perhaps draft a strategy, and if the climate is warm enough to accept it by the the members of parliament, I would put there all of these things I already mentioned and something more to make sure that something will be started. You have to start someday doing something. I admit it's very slow. You get resistance from the parliament. Not all the laws are accepted, but you have to try. And the best way perhaps is that when you draft a strategy that you can also list there small things. They might be many, but maybe it's easier to start with the easiest ones. And then when you see results, normally this is the situation when the new office of anti-corruption is established. They in the beginning they are not sure how to start working and what to do, but you need feelings of success, and there it comes from. Lots of things can be done very quickly, like some laws, but then I know that the respect of law and implementation of it is different. And I'm now trying to answer to your question that I'm not sure if it's based on religion or whatever it is, but we are so, what is the word, too obedient that we always follow the rules.
Yes.
Well, if I come here in Cyprus and I see the red light and no cars are coming, so I'm waiting the green light. and that's what happens in Finland. But if you go, I don't know how you do it, but if no cars,
mostly you stop.
Sometimes you stop, yeah. But this is the way we think, and we have this. I don't know where it comes from. Is it religion or family? How do you raising or culture? Yeah. So this is perhaps one explanation. So I don't know. It's just a different culture and different thinking, and that is good. I'm not, because every country has its own way to do these things, and you have to respect it. It's your country, it's your way, and but as what I said there was that the problems of fighting corruption, they are the same. We are talking the same topics in all countries and same methods of committing this crime. That's not rocket science. I think our policeman here will confirm it, perhaps. So that
I think we'll give the last word to the police.
The investigation part of the process, I would like to put you a few short questions, but on a practical level. First of all, is wiretapping allowed in Finland?
Sorry.
Wiretapping.
Can you just kind of summarize one question so he can answer it? And then there will be time after we close it to...
Yes.
Do you have any data or evidence that now organized crime groups like mafia type are involved in public procurements? Because as you told, millions of euros now are in public procurements.
Yeah.
And the last one, do you need as a evidence before the court that both of them, the one who gives and the one who takes the bribe, at least one of them to go into the court and have, to admit that he bribed or he was bribed? Or, the European justice system, is that Anglo-Saxonian, or what kind of system is this?
Oh, well, it's nowadays Nordic. It's based on Swedish regime, also mixed with the Russian regime. Well, wiretapping is, of course, allowed. It's a good tool, well, normally used for drugs offenses, but we can use it to bribery offenses. And it's effective. It's very good, and lots of good evidence. I can say there is this one high-level police officer mixed in, who has been in jail now, waiting for court procedures ending some day or some year. There are tens of cases, and we got good evidence against him from wiretapping, very good. So we can use it, and it's effective. Use it if you can, if you have it.
Unfortunately,
okay. So I didn't. Okay.
Because it is an effective tool and efficient.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And then the other question, giving and taking bribe. Well, it depends on the situation. Sometimes there are cases where we can't get them together to the court. So if you have evidence enough, then we take it separately. It might be possible that the other guy has gone abroad, and it takes years to find him. But we can take it at the same time or separately. Well, the funny thing is what we saw in the Slovenian case of the ex-double prime minister who was kicked out because of one Finnish bribery case 2 times out of his position, was that he was convicted in Slovenia, but those for taking a bribe. But those guys who gave the bribe, Finnish businessmen in this state-owned company, they didn't get conviction for various reasons. So sometimes it's operational tactics to just take the other one, the other case there, as you know. So and maybe later the other one, and let's see first what happens to this first case. If it goes through, then we have much better possibilities, depending on the maybe weak or thin evidence we have for the other case. It depends.
Okay, so I think we should close and take with us some important lessons from Mr. Keranen's lecture. I think the most important lesson, as we listen to him tonight, very rich information, is for everything he told us, let's try to remember the things we are missing in Cyprus. When he mentioned illicit enrichment, let us remember we have a governor of the central bank and a mayor of a town in prison. So we have illicit enrichment, but lately we have been handling it. When he talked about revolving doors, let us remember that we had ministers who will quit their ministries to go and get jobs in the industries they were supervising. When he talks about giving or taking, let's remember we have high-ranking party officials and chairmen of state-owned enterprises that are in jail for mishandling pension plans in real estate. When he talked about party financing, let us remember that we're still struggling to adopt Gregor report. When he told us that in construction is the biggest, it's one of the big corruption areas, let us remember the president of the country was accepting favors from a real estate developer. Let us also remember that we don't have an anti-corruption agency. We do not have a whistleblower procedure. But the most important thing is values. You talk about values. That I don't think it's religion. I think it's realizing that the country is your own. So we have a tradition in this country of being very proud of stealing from the state. And you were right, because the state was the Queen of England. Bad. So it was right to steal from the Queen of England. It was right to steal from the Sultan and from the Venetian regent. But then you have to understand that our state is our own. So thank you, Mr. Keränen, Juha, for joining us, the rector for arranging. Madam Ambassador, thank you very much. And we will leave remembering two things you said. The best person should rise at the top, and the best person is usually a woman. So thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.